it's funny in some ways. I think of it because I'm like, thank God for Botox. Like I'm 40 now, and I'm like, thank God. At the end of the day, you can do as much amazing skincare as you want. You can do Botox and fillers all day long, but if you're not getting the basics right, if you're not taking the time to manage stress, do exercise, sleep enough at night, you're gonna age more than anything. In everyone, wherever you're coming from or whatever walk of life you're coming from, the first step is the hardest one.
Welcome to the Restorative Force podcast, where we believe that it should feel good to be human. Modern life is fast-paced and often unforgiving. It stresses our minds, bodies, and the planet more than it needs to. So through conversations and ideas, our aim is to uncover the roadmap for shifting unsustainable cultures at pace for both personal and planetary well-being. So take a deep breath and join me, Hannah Pang, as we explore the path towards restoration and regeneration for ourselves and the world around us. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Restorative Force podcast. My name's Hannah Pang, and I am back with Dr. Jane Leonard. Jane is a fully qualified GP and Harley Street trained cosmetic doctor. Dr. Jane also returned to the NHS during the COVID-19 pandemic and was one of the founding doctors at the COVID-19 Hot Hub Escalation Centre in Soho here in London. She's worked extensively in mental health as well, which is of increasing importance nowadays. And you also might know Dr. Jane from Channel 4's show Embarrassing Bodies or from her own podcast, The Confidence Clinic. So, Dr. Jane, thank you so much for being here with me.
No, thank you so much for having me.
I would love to start off with just sharing a little bit more about your journey into medicine and how you ended up being both a GP and a cosmetic doctor.
Okay, so I suppose looking back, medical school is quite a long journey in itself because of the time that you're at university for. So I went to university at Manchester Medical School, and that's 5 years of hard work, having a brilliant time, meeting lots of different people. I think those first stages when you're really young, like I went straight from college into university, so I was 18 when I went. I think that does mould you quite a lot depending on the different people that you meet, where you've come from. Came from a really small town, it's not that small actually, St Helens, but it's Merseyside, it's near Liverpool, so I never kind of branched out of there. So going to a big city, going to Manchester, where as well as the uni I was at, there's two other ones there, so you straight away thrown into a mix of lots of different people, lots of different opportunities, and lots of different things that can inspire inspiration in you. And I think when I look back, that's kind of where it started for me to think a bit more laterally than just doing medicine itself. So during medical school, you get this opportunity to do an intercalated degree, which is basically you do an extra degree in a year.
Okay.
So I think I did it, if I'm honest, because I was having such a good time and I wanted to stay for another year. Because everyone's like, God, 5 years at uni is a long time. But when you get into it, like anything goes so fast. So I did an extra degree in anatomical sciences, and my focus in that was on the head and neck. So I learnt loads about the anatomy of the face, loads about the sort of artistry of everything, in plastics and stuff like that, based on that. So I think after that, when I left university, and I actually went off to Australia for a couple of years working there doing dermatology. So my experience of that, the medical degree, and then doing stuff about skin. When I came home after those 2 years, I continued, in my medical career in the sense that I joined the GP training, because you don't just get to the end when you're at medical school, you've got to choose your speciality.
Right.
And that can be anything. So dermatology, medicine, GP practice, whatever. So I chose GP. But at the same time as doing that, that's when I went along to do my training in aesthetics, and a lot of that was due to the influence of the dermatology training that I'd had while I was away. So that's how I ended up doing both of them. And the thing with GP work is when you're on that professional training scheme, you're doing lots of different jobs. And when I was doing the aesthetics training, which initially was in anti-wrinkle injections, so using Botox, it worked perfectly because it wasn't like I suddenly sidestepped into a different career. It was something that I was doing myself, so I had the opportunity to focus on GP that needed a lot of effort, concentration, kind of devotion to it. But because this was something that was a slow burner in the background, I think that's why it worked.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of can add on to it. Yeah. And how do you find kind of one influences the other? Like, how does a GP influence your work in your aesthetic practice, and how does your aesthetic practice influence work in your GP world, if it does at all?
It does, actually. I think it definitely does. I think now the aesthetics industry has grown so much. So I've been doing it about 10 years now, and it's diversified. It's now more seen as anti-aging medicine than just aesthetics. So essentially just doing Botox and fillers, that is how we all start in it. I think from my side of things, it's good to be a GP in it, because as it stands at the moment, it's still an unregulated industry. So anyone can kind of do it. But the only reason I think that that's quite an important thing for me to mention is, not being a doctor doesn't mean to say you can't do it. The only sort of risk that patients are taking, perhaps without going to see somebody who's medically trained, is that complications are rare, but they can and do happen. So if you go to somebody who isn't medically trained, first of all, they won't be able to potentially recognise complications with the same skill and action them in the same way as they would if you were medically trained. And I think that's the biggest thing of it. So not saying that they're not as good as a doctor, I'm not saying that at all, but just that there are things that can and do go wrong. So having the medical aspect of it in aesthetics really helps. And I suppose on the flip side, from looking at the other angle, there's lots of things now in aesthetics that, as my duty as a doctor, so looking at people holistically does come into play. So for example, like you might get patients coming to you who have problems like with body dysmorphia, anxiety and depression, even now things like eating disorders. People are coming to having things like really young. I think that aspect of being able to firstly consult these patients and dive deeper to extract this information if it's relevant, and secondly, it's our duty sometimes to say no in these situations, because if we recognise that there's something in the background like that, it's not, it's the right thing to kind of pause any further steps if needed.
Yeah, I would love to dive into that more, because as you say, it feels like it's so much more common now and like everyone's doing it, but has that kind of normalization of it where it's just become, oh yeah, okay, I'm gonna do it just because everyone else is doing it. How have you seen that kind of influence your work, and do you feel like are younger and younger people coming to you? Like, how do you handle I guess the balance between wanting to support people in wanting to like look and feel their best, with the balance of, I guess, like doing it for the wrong reasons?
Yes, I think it is, for me, just going down to the basics and building a good rapport with that person when I meet them. So the most important thing is that open, honest chat at the start of the consultation to find out what they're here for, what their expectations are, what's led them to finding me. These are things that we just talk about naturally, but there's one thing about talking and actually listening. So picking up key points of going, actually, why are you feeling like this? Because from my side, as much as theirs, doing a treatment that they don't potentially need or want it for the wrong reasons will also have repercussions on me, because they're not going to get what they want, because I need to be like, well, look, I'm not going to be able to do this, or maybe this isn't the right thing for you, or maybe need more time to think about it. So I think I'm not especially like doing things differently. I'm just being more mindful of the conversations we're having. And I think, it is important to say no, or even if you don't say no, give the person to have a cool, time to have a cooling off period, not just jump in and say, right, okay, this is what you want. Let's go ahead. Yeah. And I think that's definitely something that I'm bringing into my practice more and more. There are certain things that, when you know the person, you've gone through that journey of them, they're here to see me for a service, right? So if we've established what that service is and making sure they are happy, they know the risks, the benefits, all of that, then of course we can dive straight in.
Yeah.
But from somebody new, even if they don't come back to me, it's a risk I should be prepared to take, to allow them to have that time to digest it, make an informed decision, and then both people are on the right, doing the right thing.
Yeah, and you're on the same page about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess my other question around this is, how have you seen kind of your work in your aesthetics clinic like almost improve people's mental health? Like, I mean, I know for me, like, when I, get a haircut and like have my nails done and like makeup's all done, I do feel better.
That's the best thing about it. And that's why I genuinely love that bit about my job. Like there's certain treats that you do and I'm like, I know you're going to love this. Or when somebody's feeling like, oh, like things are too late for me, I'm too old, I should have done this too early, because now everybody's like, can be seen as something that people are doing earlier on in life, which has its pros and cons, depending on the person really. But certainly that is the best thing about it, that it does improve people's confidence. It's not, as much as I'm talking about the negative side of it, that we have to kind of say no and have to make sure people have, all the information they need, but that should be the standard of practice for anything like that. And as long as that the person has digest it properly, there are so many positives to having it that aren't just a physical thing. It's the way you feel.
Yeah, totally. And I guess that's something that even within myself and even with friends, we've kind of debated like the pros and cons of it. Of on one hand, if it can really help like boost your confidence and make you feel better, you do operate differently in the world, and there's nothing wrong with that. And on the other hand, it's like creating and reinforcing certain types of like beauty standards and the way that we like think about aging. I guess like that must be so front of mind for you and your clients, especially when you're taking a much more holistic approach.
Yeah, I think as well, like, it's funny in some ways I think of it because I'm like, thank God for Botox. Like, I'm 40 now and I'm like, thank God. Because I'm like, I don't know where I'd be without it now, literally. And anybody who's had it kind of mirrors that mindset. But it is true. It is the way it makes me feel. And I walk around, like, go out without makeup on, all those things. I'm not relying on it in that fact, but I probably do that because I've had Botox. So it's kind of just been like, yeah, you've got to be like, this is a serious thing. You have to understand about it. It's a neurotoxin. It has these effects, definitely. But that is equally what makes it amazing. So it's kind of just making sure that you look. Don't put them off too much with the hard scientific chat. But it needs to be had just because so people know where they stand, so they understand what's been injected into them, essentially.
Yeah, totally. And I guess that's the thing. You want to just be able to present people with all of the information, and it's up to them to make the best decision for themselves. And you mentioned in there confidence and how it can really help boost confidence for people. And you have an entire podcast about this called The Confidence Clinic. And you kind of explore how people overcome kind of lacks of confidence, what contributes to it, how do they kind of become more confident in order to really step into themselves more and kind of their highest self. What have you come to learn about some key contributors to confidence through conversations that you've had on your podcast?
I think it's been so valuable and beneficial to me, even being allowed to hear like some of these amazing stories that I have had with lots of the guests. I think the main thing it's shown me and taught me by the experiences we shared is that I was always sort of brought up in the way of like doing well, being successful, going to medical school, working hard, becoming a doctor, doing all this stuff is the best way to live and be, is a tick box in that way. And there are, obviously it's an amazing thing, but the thing is that I've learned that make you stronger and more confident, and that's from within rather than just having something on a piece of paper. Is actually the things that maybe might not necessarily go to plan, challenges you overcome, things going wrong essentially, are so beneficial because they either teach you something, redirect you on another path. This idea of like rejection is redirection, all these type of things. When you hear these stories, and I remember like some of the experience that I share with my guests as well, I remember feeling at the time, God, this is so difficult, or this is so bad, like how beat myself up for it, how did this happen, all these type of things. And actually when you break it down, if you just let things outplay, go with the flow of life, learn from things, reflect on things, and just have that inner belief that everything happens for a reason, as well as obviously reflecting and learning, then it's great to hear what can actually happen.
Yeah, super interesting. I mean, I think it's something that like confidence wise, I like personally have had lots of ups and downs with myself. And I think the more that you kind of share stories about what you've been through and those ups and downs, the more that you realize like it's all normal and like everyone's going through it as well. And everyone has their insecurities and things that they're working on. But by just like living and giving it a go and like keep going and keep moving forward and trying, that's how you build up that like that confidence and resilience that you can take on whatever challenge life chooses to throw at you. And that's the hardest
bit, isn't it, that people never say, that you only gain the confidence by having these things happen to give you the confidence and the belief to keep going. So I think that's the main message of it really. And I think like somebody asked me the other day, like, what is actually confidence and self-belief? And I think listening to different podcasts and hearing people's experiences, to me, it's this bank of experience that, I didn't want to do that. I was frightened of doing it. I was afraid to do this. I didn't think I was good enough. But then you straight away, because you've done it, got through it, and you can look back with pride that you did, is what self-belief and confidence is actually built on. And the only way you get that in the bank is going out doing it and kind of being willing to fail. But actually, even if you do, you either gain something by the success you're hoping for, or you gain something in a different way by it going wrong, but having the confidence to learn, having a different experience from it.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess speaking of kind of new challenges, can you tell us about the beginning of the pandemic and getting
Yeah.
kind of back into like quite hardcore action
Yeah.
when the COVID-19 pandemic came about. Tell us about that time and how you got
Well,
kind of back into that world.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, Hannah, at the time, me and a friend of mine were both aesthetics doctors. So essentially, we just I still did a bit of GP NHS work as a locum doctor, but I wasn't doing it regularly. And my friend Davina and I were like, what are we going to do? We're like, we've got no job or no things. So we went into this thing, and I'm telling you now, like, if I'd have known how bad it was going to be, I might have thought twice about doing it. And when I say how bad it was, I mean, we didn't really know what COVID was.
Yeah.
And
I
we
mean,
were all
risky
thinking,
to be in that environment all the time.
And I was just thinking it's going to be over in a couple of months. Let's just do it. But actually, it wasn't. But I think, again, going back to what we're talking about, confidence-wise, I'm so glad I did that. I wouldn't be doing the things I'm doing now as embarrassing bodies and things like that. But also from the point of view of, I am a trained doctor at the end of the day, and I was in a situation where I was single. I didn't have any kids at home. I wasn't putting anybody at risk. I have those skills and...
There's a big need.
Yeah, and what we're going to do, I'm more than happy to go back and kind of like, what do they, take part. It was a bit like that, take part in it. And I'm so glad I did. And I think the obviously there's risk to it, but there's risk of being a doctor anyway. And I think that's how we sort of felt in that sense that going back and learning about things and actually just seeing things unfold the way they did. Once we were in it, none of us left.
Yeah. And I think for me, there's obviously so much going on during that time, but I think people became so much more aware of their health, both physically and mentally during that time. And I guess even kind of at a basic level, like, what would you recommend for people just to like stay well from like a physical perspective? I know we were just talking about how we both were like sick over the holidays.
Yeah.
So like, what are some of the just basic stuff that you recommend people to do to stay healthy?
I think what it comes down to is the simple things are the best things. The things that we go on and on about all the time.
Yes.
But you're like, God, that's so obvious. But it's like sleep loads, eat 5 fruit and veg a day, drink lots of water. But those key things are foundations. The thing about those things are it's consistency, not just doing them as a one-off. So it's a case of, exercising daily, getting enough sleep, drinking water, having a variety in your diet, doing all the wellness, like taking time out for yourself, managing stress. It's all well and good doing it, but it has to be done consistently. And I think personally, things I've learned definitely through that COVID experience as well is you don't realise how delicate your health actually is. And I felt so lucky that, we went into that situation and I say I never got COVID, but they weren't testing us for COVID. So we would have got COVID, but we never got ill with it.
Oh, I see.
And it was amazing seeing how resilient your body can be. And I know personally, I do look after myself better after that. Like even little things I was doing during the pandemic. At the time I was living in Notting Hill or Holland Parkway. So I would walk from there every day to Oxford Circus because they didn't want us on public transport or things like that. And we had that time where you could be out and about. And even that, just walking to work for an hour and walking back, because we know we could do an exercise and I couldn't be bothered going out running. I was just like, whatever. So even little things like that you take into account that just kind of become part of your day. And then now, because of walking all the time, I actually quite like doing it. So I try and make sure that I do it. Like I was like, God, I don't even know my way around London. I'll literally get a tube, 2 stops because I don't know the way. I've lived here so long. Like little things that you can just do that are about repetition and habit. So I think it's doing those things to change the habit. There isn't a miracle thing where you can say, right, take this vitamin, eat this food, do that. It's about the longevity of looking after your body at that time. And I think the thing I'm trying to work on now is managing stress. Like my job, I love my job and I'm always doing lots of different things. For me to do that at the level I need to be, a lot of these things can be stressful.
Yeah.
And if I'm not on top form, I can't manage the stress. Not that I can't manage, but when I'm not stressed, I can do it with ease.
Yes.
Whereas the other thing, and then if I'm stressed, I don't sleep as well. And all these things kind of spiral.
Totally.
And so it's kind of just making sure you just keep going back to the baseline of those things.
Yeah.
And don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah. I think we talk a lot on this podcast about stress and stress management and the bad things that can happen if you are overstressed and don't know how to manage it and get out of it, but also the positive things that come from stress and how they can help make you more resilient, more confident, and they help you to grow. There's like a sweet spot of kind of the stress window.
There definitely is. And I think the thing I realised when I look back at times when I was stressed, I kind of was chronically stressed, I think, at some points in my life. And I just managed it. You know, that idea of this adrenal fatigue.
Yes.
I certainly have had times where, like now, I don't feel stressed. So if I do feel stressed, I'll feel it.
Yeah.
So like now, I'm like, God, I feel like really chilled. I'm doing lots of things. And like, I can think better. I can sleep better. I can do all these little bits and pieces that I would never do because I was so like on the board with everything.
Yeah.
And then I can realise if I do feel stressed, and then as you say, is it a positive or negative thing? Whereas in other parts of my life, I definitely have felt consistently stressed.
And then you don't even know how bad it is.
And then you don't even know how bad it is because
you're
you're normally like that. And then the only way you find out about that is when you do burn out.
Yeah.
And I've only had that a couple of times in my life, but it is that feeling of like, you know, I can't sleep at all. It's sleep with me that it shows him.
Yeah.
I can't sleep. And then you just get used to that. And then when you break the thing and you actually do sleep, I'm like, God, I can't get up.
Yeah.
And it's like this thing. So I think that is the main thing about it. There's definitely positives to it, but I think you have to tune yourself into that thing of knowing like, oh, actually, and appreciate that you don't feel stressed. What am I doing that's not making me feel stressed? And it's a lot of the thing with me is protecting my own energy.
Yeah. Making
sure that I'm fitting enough time not to be racing around. Like my goals were always to fit as much in 24 hours that I could.
Yeah.
Whereas now I'm like, no, actually, I'll just do two things.
Yeah.
Or actually, I need to have a rest. So that makes my life a lot easier. Whereas before, I would just be like, go, go, go. If I can do it, I will.
Yeah.
Whereas that just means that you do a lot of things mindlessly as well.
Totally. And I think from just going back to kind of the pandemic time that was so intense, and I know you also have kind of an expertise in the mental health space as well, and that was it's something that was really challenging for a lot of people during the pandemic. Even if they didn't get COVID, it was the mental health aspect of it. What other kind of learnings do you feel like came out from the COVID-19 pandemic about mental health? It was definitely on people's awareness so much more, but I think it's because so many more people like were struggling with it. I guess what were you seeing at the time from your perspective?
I think the mental health aspects or the influence COVID had on it was many things really. I think one bit of it was we all realised our own mortality in a way, that we're not going to live forever, and there's something there that, you know, is obviously dangerous, and there was that fear factor. That was one thing that was definitely there, but also it forced reflection on people, reflection about what they're doing with their lives. Am I happy? Am I looking after myself? And that in itself could have multiple effects on your mental health. If you're reflecting your life going, God, I'm onto a good thing here, I'm proud of myself, what I'm doing, then amazing. Protect yourself, protect that energy to keep, you know, the machine playing and doing what you're doing. Or otherwise, you know, how many people went through breakups during it? How many people changed their jobs? How many people decided to continue living out of London or in a different country or whatever? That's because it forced that upon them to do it. And I think there's that bit that was something that none of us were actually immune to, really. It did cause that reflection. But I also think as well that separate to that, because that's all circumstantial, the actual things that if you did suffer from a mental health problem, things like depression and anxiety understandably will get worse. Depression, a lot of it is because you're forced in isolation. We all were. Yeah. And that is a part of it. Sometimes people who are depressed, sometimes they socially isolate themselves anyway, and that being forced on them would make their symptoms worse. Obviously, the anxiety things, you know, health anxiety is basically slammed onto people then because it was constantly there. There's no getting away from it. So I think that those were those things that I certainly saw. And the other then aspect of all of that is because of what was happening in the National Health Service. So mental health services weren't available. Yeah, true. So no matter what box you would have fitted into, getting the help that you needed was difficult and harder than ever. So I think they're the main things, the actual way COVID made you think, reflect, and then will move forward the rest of your life. And that thing that none of us like to face, that we are all going to die. So it's that, you know, what are you doing with your life? And then obviously it could cause people to have new mental health problems that unfortunately they might not be able to access the same support.
Yeah, and I guess on that, even now, if people are struggling with mental health, do you have kind of like go-to recommendations? I know it can be so different for everyone, but even just like coming out of the pandemic and just having kind of big learnings about what was happening with people's mental health, is there anything that you saw, just works, like, generally speaking, for people?
I think as well, the best thing about the pandemic and mental health, obviously talking about the negative just then, but the best thing is it raised everyone's awareness.
Yeah.
Everyone speaks about it so much more. Everyone's so open about it. And I think the main thing to say is that it can affect any of us at any part of our lives, and we need to look at it more that, if you have a chest infection or you have COVID or whatever, you seek medical attention, you get treated in the appropriate way medically, because we can't see a mental health problem. Obviously, some of these things have symptoms, but it's often up to the person to vocalise them, and it takes strength
lot.
when you're feeling at your worst.
Yeah.
And that first step is often the hardest one, but the one that's going to make the biggest change. So I would just encourage anybody who is feeling in any way low, affected by the mental health, whatever symptoms they're experiencing, just to say that in everyone, wherever you're coming from or whatever walk of life you're coming from, the first step is the hardest one, but you were definitely not alone, and there are more treatments out there than you think. So even if you just get yourself out there to see your doctor, that's the first step in getting better and feeling better.
Yeah. And for you, even personally, I imagine that was like a wildly stressful time for any doctor, like, working at the time. How did you keep yourself kind of well during that?
I think, to be honest,
time?
One of the things about me is I had to keep working, because if I'd had any time to think about anything else, I probably would have ended up not in the good mental health space either. It gave me purpose, right? So I even going back to what we were saying, I'm like alone, I don't have any kids, I'm doing all that. Without that work, I've got no purpose. So even that in itself raised things to me about my life. So me going to work and doing that, and particularly the job I was doing, they needed us to be doing it.
Yeah.
So it gave me a reason to get out of bed, a reason to be doing stuff, a reason to kind of take part in it. Whereas if I hadn't had that and I'd have been living on my own, I definitely would have been a completely different place altogether.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, the idea of having that sense of purpose and reason to wake up every day. Yeah. And just to switch gears a little bit to talk about your role on Embarrassing Bodies, can you tell us more about the show and kind of the purpose of what you're trying to achieve on it?
Yeah, so Embarrassing Bodies had actually been a real iconic show in the UK. They'd done 8 episodes before we did the 9th. And the main purpose of it actually is breaking down barriers to consultation. So breaking down the barriers that stops people coming to see a doctor. And the number one reason is often embarrassment, anxiety, thinking they can't be helped, all of those types of things. So the reason Embarrassing Bodies came back after the pandemic is, at that time, everybody was COVID focused. Everybody forgot about the other illnesses that were there. It was like, this is the one that's going to get us all, or this is the one that the problem lies with, and the other one slips into the background. Whereas that isn't the case at all, and particularly because NHS services have been so stretched and focused on COVID, everything else had took a back step. So people weren't coming forward because COVID was seen as number one, and secondly, it was seen that the NHS couldn't manage it anyway.
Yeah.
So we were really trying to bring around the balance that actually other conditions are still here. Please, basically just get out, seeing your doctor again. I think the main thing is there's 2 categories really, or people tend to fall in 2 camps with conditions that aren't COVID. It was like, people either think they're too anxious about going, and that's because they're worried of either getting bad news a lot of the time. But the truth is, the sooner you go, the better the outcome can be.
Right.
And it can be easily fixed. And even if it's not that, it can be something that can be equally fixed really quickly. You don't have to be anxious about it at all.
Yeah.
So it's just breaking down the worries and the fear and trying to just being a bit more relatable on TV about it.
Yeah, I love that, of like just destigmatize going to get stuff checked out.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously everything on there is a bit like the more the things, the visual things and things that are of interest, but we did try to incorporate many different things and a lot of wellness promotion. We did lots of things about smear test campaigns. At the time we were talking a lot about checking your poo, all things like that. Like, it came on every level.
Yeah.
But they're all things that no one really talks about, but are essential.
Yeah. It's just bringing to mind lots of conversations I've had recently about the importance of preventative care
Yeah.
as well. And I think that's something that often we wait for so long until something is like really bad before we'll go get something like checked out. And the earlier that you can get it like checked out, and just as you say, like even if it's nothing, at least then you know, and you don't have the anxiety about it that it might be something.
Yeah, definitely.
Don't have to like risk it.
I think, and that's the biggest thing, isn't it? It was almost being like, right, just taking that first step again, going and seeing somebody could completely take away all that anxiety over something that actually is really solvable, really simple. We just need to investigate it. Or in fact, it is something more serious. But the sooner you go, the sooner we can action it, and then that is the key to getting better or moving forward with it, at least.
Yeah, definitely. And even kind of now, are you still working in the NHS, or are you back to your
so I do
clinic?
a bit of both.
Okay.
So I still do NHS, just locum sessions in GP practice,
Yeah.
and then the rest of the time doing aesthetics.
Nice. And have you seen, I guess, kind of going back to your aesthetic clinic now, I feel like I've seen, like just on social media, a big like increase in the amount of people talking about, their, going to their Botox clinics or like getting filler. And it's just become so much more normalized, especially with the influence that social media has.
Yeah.
Do you find like there's trends that that you're basically like seeing over time of people coming to you for?
I think maybe, but I think, to be honest, really, Hannah, like we're still doing the same types of things. It's just like you say, like things can change in popularity. I think it's just managing them in the right way. Like I think going to the preventative thing, people and I think I'm guilty of it sometimes on social media, talking about this idea of like prevention is better than cure. Yes, it is. But also that doesn't mean start doing Botox when you're 18.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, and I'd be like, for me, a lot of these treatments are about building people's confidence in the way they look, which then translates in the way they feel as the person they are. So I don't think having a wrinkle is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Or like wrinkles are bad, let's get rid of them, and like you've got to be like this. Or I certainly don't advocate searching for perfection. To me, imperfection is beauty as much as anything else. It's not about that. It's more about doing things that can be done, which we're fortunate enough that we can do all these things. But it's the influence it has on you and the way you feel. I just think, I'm actually glad there was trends at one time of all this like Kim Kardashian looks that some people will be offering packages of like nose filler, chin filler, jawline filler, cheek fillers. And I was just like, no, like I just... if anyone said that, I was like, that I'm not your doctor, you know? Many people might do that, but I think offering things like that totally reinforce the wrong message we should be giving. It should be looked at on an individual basis, not a package to go, do all this, you'll look like Kim Kardashian.
Right. So I guess that's like, it's such a unique thing, and you want to like enhance someone's uniqueness rather than just do a copy paste of what someone else
and that's just going
like.
to reinforce people's expectations which you're never going to meet.
Yeah. So you've talked about this a little bit already, but can you tell us like how, like dive into those conversations a little bit more of like when you actually like have to say no to a patient?
I think when I first started doing aesthetics, people might come to me and show me a picture of someone's lips, or they were the main one, lips really, and say, this is what I want them like. And a lot of that will be off my Instagram, because I'm fortunate enough, I've got quite a few gorgeous friends of mine that are repeatedly on my Instagram like, I'm not going to turn you into her overnight, because if I could do that to myself, I would have done. Like, it's one of those things. But I'm seeing now, instead of going, oh, I like Indy's lips, or I like the shape of that eyebrow lift, people are coming more like with a filter and going,
wow,
this type of thing. Like, if I put this filter on my face and my nose goes like that, and I'm like, oh, that's like essentially an animation. It's like, something that can't really be achieved. And that to me is where alarm bells would start ringing, or where I'd have to be like, that's never going to be achieved because it's a filter. Yeah, I can make your lips a bit bigger. Yes, I can contour them. And I see what you're saying by showing me Indy's lips. You like it in this way.
Yeah.
That's fine. I understand. It's a good way, a good example to direct the treatment that I'm going to do. But anything like that is kind of, it isn't, it's just not, it's not replicating normal life.
That is so interesting. I didn't even think of that
Yeah.
And I guess, have you seen an increase of that, really, of it being about the filters and people's like expectations of what they should look like have shifted?
I don't think they do as much, probably because they know I'll just go no. I'm like, no, I'll just go no. Can you do that? No. And what I do see though is people being influenced by the way social media makes them feel, and people doing a lot of things like Zoom calls and stuff like that, and you know, they notice the asymmetry and like of the face, and they feed that back.
That's a really good point. People are staring at themselves a lot more now than we used to.
All little things, and people give such a hard time about themselves in that way. I think a lot of it goes down to, and I did a campaign about this on Embarrassing Bodies about comparison culture, and that is something that is completely fueled by the effect of social media. And look, I'm not here to like moan about it. I use it. It's an amazing tool for my work, for my personal profile, what I'm trying to grow. There's so many amazing things related to it, but you've got to understand that it works in a certain way, and a lot of that is giving this curated portrayal of yourself or of a brand or whatever that influences the way we feel about ourselves, and then reinforces behaviours and desires to do things. And aesthetics is a perfect one because it basically, you know, shows things that look pretty, and then that's where you go and get it. But yeah, I think that's the only thing I would say, and more about what you said about trends. I think I find myself sort of saying to people, please don't feel like that. Everybody feels the same when you go on Instagram and see all these things going on. But again, that is not, you know, I'm only showing you the best bits.
Right.
I'm only showing you these things.
Most
Everybody
people are,
does, yeah. Like that's it. That is not really how, like, but so it's just understanding that everybody, if you keep scrolling enough through Instagram, you're going to be having those thoughts at some point. But yeah, that's the only thing about it. I think it just makes people feel bad about themselves and talk bad to themselves. You know, people always say that, like, oh, I'm sorry, I look like this. I'm like, it's fine. Like, you know, I only got a bit of makeup on because I'm at work. Otherwise, I'd be like, you know, it is one of those things that you see more and more.
Yeah, interesting. Do you have any, I guess, like thoughts or ideas of like what kind of are the next things coming in the aesthetic space? Because I didn't even think about the whole filter side of things. I just thought about, you see, you know, everyone doing it now, so you feel pressure to do it, but now you also have, you know, a tech filter on all the time that can make you look completely different from yourself.
It trains our brains to think that's normal.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Everyone's forgot like what a normal picture looks like. So then you can put it to a filter. Of course, you're going to be like, God, that's reality. Like, so, I think one of the good things that I'm seeing more in aesthetics now is I was going to say moving away from fillers. We're not, but there are other things that are used now that are more that anti-age your skin in a different way. So traditionally we use anti-wrinkle injections with Botox in the top third of your face, so your forehead and around your eyes. It relaxes the muscles, which stops the wrinkles. It basically smooths away the lines and wrinkles and then stops them forming over time. And then we use in the lower bit of your face fillers that are basically clear gels containing hyaluronic acid, and they basically add or replace volume to your face, so they can give you contours like that Kim Kardashian package or like help smooth away lines and wrinkles. Okay. They are the two main things that we always do. But now we've got these groups of what are called bioremodeling agents, which are things like Profilo and things that stimulate your skin to rejuvenate themselves. There's something called polynucleotides. So Profilo is basically hyaluronic acid like the fillers. But fillers have the hyaluronic acid molecules packed tightly together, and that varies. This is called cross-linkage, depending on the type of filler you use. So you need high cross-links for high cheekbones, if you think, and then lighter ones for things like lines and wrinkles. Profilo has no cross links, so it's purely there to hydrate your skin. And the second effect, it stimulates collagen and elastin formation. And polynucleotides, you might have heard about them, but they're basically segments of DNA that are extracted from fish. In fact, fish semen, so from trout and salmon.
Interesting.
Don't ask me how people found this out. But when you inject them into human skin, it stimulates our fibroblasts, those special cells in our skin, to make more collagen and elastin. So both of those two things make what our skin needs to stay young, which is collagen and elastin. In the case of Profilo, hyaluronic acid and hydration, because hyaluronic acid is highly hydrophilic, which basically means it loves water. So it pulls water towards it.
So interesting. I guess, to be honest, it's something I haven't thought that much about, of like how these things actually work. So can we actually like go through them a little bit? So Botox, you were saying, is it a neurotoxin?
Yeah, so Botox...
What does that mean?
So Botox is a neurotoxin, and what it basically does, it's quite a scary word, but basically it's blocks the message between a nerve and a muscle. So when you in the muscles all around our body, our brain sends a message to the muscle to do
something. Yeah.
So you go to frown, which I can't
see.
do. So what it does is the messenger between that gap, which is called a synapse, is something called acetylcholine. Botox, the botulinum toxin, sits in those receptors, so it stops the acetylcholine, which is the message getting through. So that effect lasts between 3 to 6 months, and it basically depends on the dosage that you put in and your sensitivity to it. Basically means how much of an effect you're going to get, or how much sort of muscle relaxing you're going to get.
Got it. So I have gotten Botox before, but I got it at my dentist, like in my
Yeah.
jaw, because I had like really bad clenching. And I didn't love it because I don't know, maybe she put like way too much in, but I basically couldn't smile for like 3 months.
I hear you. I had that happen to me once. I couldn't smile for 7 months.
Oh my gosh.
My God. What's happened there basically is your masseter muscle is a muscle at the corner at the angle of the jaw, right? So your masseter muscles are muscles of mastication, so you need them for chewing.
Right.
And in the case that I had that same problem in, again related to stress, is clenching and grinding. So over time that muscle hypertrophies, so increases in strength and size, and so you get a bulky muscle at the side of your face, and also you get this repetitive behavior that builds the strength of the muscle over time. So Botox is the perfect treatment for that because it relaxes the muscle, it helps to break that cycle of the clenching and grinding, and in turn, because the muscle isn't contracted as much, it flattens it in, so it has the secondary effect of slimming the face. But there's a tiny thin muscle called the restorative muscle that sits at the top of this muscle, but its origin of connection varies from person to person. So what I'm saying is, when you're injecting in there, it's essentially a blind treatment. So the more you go inwards, or the more dose you put in, because essentially Botox is a fluid that can diffuse. If it affects the restorer, then that's when you can't smile. Yeah. And that's what happened to me and you. It is a side effect. I do say to patients, because of the way it affected me, I'm just really cautious with it. Yeah. I just use a little bit and be like, you might come back to me and say, Jane, this is rubbish. It hasn't worked. So I go, okay, well, I'd rather you say that than I can't smile. So you just do it bit by bit.
Yeah.
It's rare, but it can happen.
Yeah. That, I just like, looking back at photos of that time, I just like looked sad for a few months.
I just looked mad. I was just like trying to force this smile that my mouth wouldn't open.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like, thank goodness it doesn't last forever. So
no, it is temporary.
I can smile now, which is great.
Yeah, same. When I saw my smile coming back, I can't describe I was elated. I was like, oh my God, it's back.
Yeah. But really interesting what you were saying about the other treatments. It sounds like they almost are working to leverage like how our bodies work
Exactly that. It's using our own body to make the things it needs.
Is there anything else that's like interesting on your radar that you're excited by?
A lot of the things at the moment, because of the way I'm working, I don't use any energy devices, so things like lasers and things like that. I tend to refer patients on to colleagues for them. And that is the other way of sort of like tightening your skin. Many of these things end at the same point, but the different ways of doing the same thing. So this idea of collagen elastin stimulus is what the baseline of many of these treatments are. And that's including that things like microneedling and things that basically micro-trauma the skin, again, to stimulate this healing process, which collagen elastin fibre formation is key to. And then the same with many energy devices, so lasers do the same. But I think a lot of these things are like suit people on a personal level. Like, there's definitely the polynucleotides. I've had 3 goes of it under my eyes because my skin was really dry and crepey and delicate, so Botox wasn't really suitable for it, and I didn't need fillers. So it was the middle ground or something, because it's not actually putting anything in, it's just stimulating your own skin to recreate what it needs.
Yeah, super interesting. I guess the more that's kind of developed in this space, the better solutions for each individual you'll be able to create, rather than of what we were talking about before of like copy paste.
Exactly.
One treatment that might work for one person and not for someone else.
Exactly. And I think it's just like these things, essentially the baseline of everything should be do no harm. Don't make anything worse. Don't cause any problems. The only problem with it, because Botox and fillers do work so well, I can easily go, right, there's your frown. Now you've got no frown. Or because they do that. Whereas these things slightly are going to be more subjective, because other factors will come into play. So, for example, the genetics, what your skin is like already, how much good quality collagen you've got there already, what your lifestyle's like, many things.
Yeah. Have you ever had kind of a client come to you who, from a like mental health perspective was in a really good place, you felt really confident about giving them a treatment, and then they got like too like sucked into it and like wanted more and more and more?
Yeah, I think most of us practitioners would say that. I think it's just the hardest thing to unpick in that is going back to the point of like it makes you feel confident, and in some ways is simple, quick and easy to do. There's not much downtime to it. You understand why people are like, oh, amazing, let's do another one type of thing. I think it's just understanding that it's not that simple, really. Like, the thing is with the anti-wrinkle injections, the Botox, you do need to keep them up, right? I'd see your point before about it wearing off. So with that, that's fine. As long as that the muscle contraction is there and you're not coming back any sooner than 3 months, we can do it. But when it comes to other things, I think it's important that overfilling and creating too much change in your face is something just to be wary of.
Yeah. And I guess even then from like think through a mental health perspective as well, if you feel like you're constantly changing like how you look, I imagine that can be quite challenging for someone's like identity and how they like see themselves.
It's really tricky because I think as well, it's like for us as well, not overstepping the mark with them. At the end of the day, we're not having in-depth mental health consultations with them.
Yeah,
so for me to sort of like judge them too much clinically on that without asking the questions, and also not being able to offer them treatment even if I did,
right,
from that side of it, I think it's more being kind to them, hearing them out, asking the questions, pressing pause on the treatments, and then a lot of that time just by building a good rapport with them, giving them space to listen, they will be like, I'm actually feeling really crap about myself, so I'm going through a massive breakup, or I'm doing this, or like, and then it's just like, well, that's completely natural to feel like that. Yeah, let's do some things that are going to boost your confidence and help kickstart that side of it.
Yeah.
But also let's realise that these aren't the answer to everything. Doing too much, because the effect of them will wear off. Which in fact, because if I'm making you potentially look worse, or that you're going to feel, then that's another thing going wrong that's going to hit your confidence hard.
Yeah.
So I think it's just making sure that you give them the time and space to have these conversations and
like build trust with them.
Yeah, exactly.
As well. And I imagine for them too, like how you look is something that is very personal and can really, affect your mental health. So you want to go to someone who you really trust and is going to tell you like what's going to look good and not look good and kind of work for you and not work for you.
Because less is more with a lot of these things. I think it's just making sure that you kind of... Yeah, I think it's just exploring the expectations, a lot of it, and then you kind of take it from there. But there's so many different layers to the reasons for presentation. I think that's why it's key to have those conversations. But the lucky thing as well about my job is that you do see the patients over and over again, so you do naturally develop that rapport. Like I have half an hour with most people. About 2 minutes is actually injecting, seriously. But it's like chatting to them and talking through things, and obviously going through the consultation. But that's the key things of it, and I think that's why it's also that you do give people that space and not feeling like they're being judged by something else by the way they look, because I'm not perfect and I'm not sat there going, right, you need to be doing X, Y, and Z. Whereas an approach which some people do take.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing. Like at the end of the day, it is like up to them to make the choice that they think is best for them with the information that they have.
And if they really want something, do it. And I'm like, look, I personally think that isn't the right thing for you, or both of us to work together on it.
Yeah,
you're more than welcome to go with someone else.
Right.
But I just think that it's not needed or whatever.
Yeah, but I imagine that's why people go to you and trust you, because they know you're going to give them the honest answer as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else kind of in the aesthetic space, in the wellness space that you are excited about kind of in the next couple of years? Like, where do you see the space going? I think in a really positive way, a lot of things are moving towards this idea of get the inside right and the outside follows. Like that thing of like, because at the end of the day, you can do as much amazing skincare as you want. You can do Botox and fillers all day long. But if you're not getting the basics right, if you're not taking the time to manage stress, do exercise, sleep enough at night, you're going to age more than anything
that we can pump into your skin. So I think all of these things are a combinational effect. And I think the good thing that certainly social media definitely does fuel in a positive way is being real about mental health and reframing the way we look at things like exercise. I think in the past, like, it was all about being skinny and eating as little as you can and all that. Now it's like fuel your body, eat variety, listen to what your body needs, get enough sleep, that sort of thing. And I think if you do have those basics, like, I know now if I don't get enough sleep, the way I look is completely different than when I do get enough sleep.
Totally.
And it's like, and I don't know if that's just a getting older thing, but I know it's the way as well that I feel within myself and the way that I'll make better choices during that day. You know, I won't eat crap food, I'll fit in exercise, I'll do things. And even if I don't, because I'm feeling better, I don't feel bad about myself for not doing it.
Yeah.
Like, they're all things that happen. So I think that is the best thing about it. It's moving towards things in the wellness industry that certainly are integrated into aesthetics that, skin, the foundation of good skin is the foundation of good health. A lot of things, for example, go on your skin reflects an internal process. So I know, because I used to have really bad acne when I was younger, and the main cause of that definitely was stress.
Yeah, totally. I think that, it's such a good point. It does feel like, even with kind of more research and more awareness, like taking a more holistic approach does seem to be where the wellness world hopefully is going, where you're, as you say, looking at the kind of integrated version of wellness of the inside and the outside.
Yeah.
Which is positive.
Yeah, exactly. And it's true. I think that's the evidence of it. And they're all things that, also, it doesn't really alienate anyone into groups. Like, sometimes, aesthetic treatments, a lot of things we're talking about are expensive.
Yeah.
And actually, though, there are things that you can do in a more rounded way that can really help the way that you look and help the way that you feel. It's going back to the basics. And a lot of these things don't cost anything. Like fitting in, going for a walk, getting outside, getting enough sleep, all those things you can do for free.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's making sure that we're thinking about that, not just being like it's a privilege thing.
Yeah, for sure. And on our Restorative Force podcast, and with Rain in general, we love talking about how can we live more optimally, especially for how our minds and bodies are designed. So I was really interested to hear about how more solutions are coming to market that like actually leverage the like magic of how our body works. But anyways, what I wanted to ask you is kind of optimal living, like for you as a person, as an individual, like what does that mean? What does that look like? What does an optimal kind of day, what would that look like for you?
I think it's actually gone full circle. My optimal day used to be get up as early as you can, race around and fit as many things into this tick box list as you can, and probably then go to bed really late after doing all that.
Yeah.
So I think now it's just, it kind of sounds cliche, but we're just going back to the basic things more. I actually value now a lot more of time, even sometimes being on my own. I know that sounds weird to say, but
no, I'm the same.
I think like with a job like mine and for doing things all the time, I don't realise how much energy I need to give to do a good job and to be on the ball and to do everything from kind of, fitting in the sleep, getting up and doing the exercise, making good decisions about food, getting your hair done, doing your makeup, making sure your house is nice, all of these things, then doing a full day in clinic, and then fitting in your social life and stuff like that. All of those things, to do it optimally and to enjoy it as well, you need to look after your energy. And I think it's just factoring in sometimes that you can't sometimes or some days do everything, and just doing little things that make the day enjoyable.
Yeah.
Like little things, even just they could just be whatever they are. But I think definitely now, rather than I used to, like every second of the day used to be filled for me, every second. And I where I'm working at the moment, there's a lot of like osteopaths and people that do things related to sort of like generalized wellness as well, and they run about my nervous system and having some therapies for. I was like, do you ever do any of that? I was like, no, like never, because it was in overdrive for like years. And I think now it's just doing things that make me feel happier and content, I think.
Yeah,
and all of them means you're more present. That's the bottom line, probably what I'm trying to get at. This racing around, and I am fitting in a million things a day, and I'm living an exciting life, which I love doing.
Yeah.
But it's making sure that you're not just like, a busy fool.
Yeah. And like for what purpose?
Yeah.
I think that's the thing.
Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah. I'm also kind of working on more and more is like, how do I just like live every day to the fullest. And that doesn't mean having a back-to-back schedule just to like check off as much as humanly possible. But how can I, just like do what I love doing and enjoy the day.
Yeah.
And that's all we really have is like the present.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think what goes back to that interestingly, Hannah, is like when to have that luxury to do that now is the product of all the graft that I've put in before.
Yeah.
And it's the same for you, whatever way that is. So I think it's sort of looking at going, I mean, maybe it's a fact of now being older, I haven't got the energy for that or the drive to do it. So that's why it wouldn't work. So I'm grateful for my time in my 20s of doing all that, like, you know, things that now I'm like, what's the bloody point of doing that? Like, but at that time it mattered so much to me. So now you can kind of reap the rewards of it.
Yeah.
Or realise what was important to me then. It just isn't now.
Yeah. And that it's not going to look the same every year. It's going to change.
Exactly. Things change and everything like that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me.
That's
that was such an interesting, very informative conversation as well. Yeah. So thank you so much. If people want to find out more about you and your work, where can we send them?
Really easily. So Instagram is just my name, Dr. Jane Leonard. It just does the name of my website as well. I'm going through a rebrand at the moment, so hopefully that's going to be looking really new and slick soon. Yeah. And then TikTok the same. Although I hate driving people to TikTok because it's not my favourite. But yeah, I'm on that as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you again so much for speaking with me.
Thank you for having me. Honestly, thanks a lot.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to the Restorative Force podcast. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating and review and share it with a friend. You can follow us at Wellbeing on Instagram and at TikTok. Thanks so much and see you next time.